Hi, welcome to the Bible Nation podcast. I'm Doug Levesque with Pastor Georges of Emmanuel Baptist Church. BibleNation.org is the website. Make sure you go on there if you want to communicate with us, see our podcasts, or buy our products. We're glad to have you with us here today. Today we're going to be talking about sports. We've always said that we wanted to do something like this, but since Michigan won the national championship, we decided,
Go Blue.
Bless God, we're going to do it. And if you didn't know that, Michigan Wolverines won the national championship. Sorry to rub that in, those of you watching from Indiana and Ohio. What are we standing up for? The ability, the freedom to do what's right as God defines that right.
God's the ultimate author of liberty.
We don't want government to stand between us and our freedom to do what is right.
But, sports is both good and bad. It can be used for good, it can be used for evil. But today we want to talk about sports as a weapon in culture. Let's start off with in the news. We started this last week, and every week there's some things that just really stand out as being particular to our culture. And how does a Bible culture absorb what's going on? Well, we just have the National Day of Prayer, and the plans usually are that the National Day of Prayer meeting would be at some church. Someone would invite it, they would pay for it, and they would kind of host the main event, and then it would be celebrated around the country. And this year in particular, the National Day of Prayer is going to be inside the U.S. Capitol building. Now, you're having atheists complain because, government money is being spent when you have a religious event inside a government building. Security, lights, et cetera, administration. And Daily Beast newspaper says that church and state separation is breaking down before our very eyes. And Speaker Johnson of the U.S. Congress is basically kind of taking the lead on this. And even though that we love prayer, Pastor Jay, we're for a National Day of Prayer just being exercised. You guys practice that here in Owasso. It's been like the longest civil meeting's been going on for decades. We really aren't for the government necessarily being the one that puts it on and mandates it or exposes it. It should be private money, that's putting it on. And so I kind of don't like the atheist, rhetoric against Christianity in it. But at the same time, we're giving them ammo because we can't, we do have a secular form of government that doesn't necessarily take a scripture and verse and mandate it down anybody's throats. You can be in the United States and be a Christian or not. You can be a Jew, a Muslim, a Buddhist, or nothing, a none. And the National Day of Prayer, you can pray to whatever you want to pray to or not.
Right.
And that's how I would execute it, and just say, if you're a Christian, let's pray together. And we've always had such a majority that if my people, which are called by my name, should humble themselves and pray, turn from their wicked ways, I will heal their land. I will do for them. And so I've always believed in a National Day of Prayer and in a Bible culture, but it's not something that can be mandated through a constitution. Otherwise, you have the King of England, who's also the head of the Church of England, and he can more or less throw down some kingly mandates, and then the nation's got to pay the taxes for that, and that's what our forefathers absolutely did not want. So, right. I'm for a National Day of Prayer. I'm not necessarily for holding it in the Capitol building.
Yeah, well, it depends on who's motivating it.
Sure.
It's the people's building,
sure.
And so it's been free for people to go there, and so it's not an endorsement.
Well,
but we're also not against Christianity or influence upon government.
Sure.
Right, and so we should be able to speak our voice and have it.
To call it the National Day of Prayer is just a name.
Right.
It's not necessarily on the national calendar, but it does open up for them to then say have the Coven Association of Child Sacrifice, and then have to open up the Capitol building for something like that as well. So it does open up a can of worms, because then you can have National Hindu Meditation Day, or Buddhist Pretend We're Nothingness Day, or Muslim Jihad, National Jihad Day at the Capitol building. So I do think we have to be careful about the precedent, how it's executed.
Sure.
One of the things that that Speaker Johnson has been accused of is being part of these groups that are kingdom dominionists. And that is, we're going to use politics or anything in culture to bring about the kingdom of God, which is something that God himself brings in. I think we should use our Christian influence to bring people to Christ and to build and promote freedom of religion for the local New Testament church to thrive. in. That's what I think is biblical. And so I do think that it is a point of topic. The country's talking about it right now. Secondly, in the news today is Tucker interviews President Putin of Russia. And, he said a lot of things about the United States, about Ukraine, about weapons, and about prisoners, about NATO. But one of the most alarming statements that he's made is his statements about artificial intelligence. In particular, Al Jazeera says in their 5 key moments from the interview is that Vlad is afraid of Elon Musk because he said Elon Musk can do whatever he wants. In other words, kind of like holding America like we're cousins, going, hey, we gotta team up here and beware of Elon Musk because he can do whatever he wants, and we've got to hold him accountable, sort of thing. And maybe that's just a tactic he's trying to build unity on or under, but it's the exact sort of thing that might build unity because of Elon Musk's actions or inactions.
Right.
And so, people are talking about today, and we have a podcast all about that issue. The other thing in the news today is Governor Whitmer of Michigan. Is she the savior of public education? The new budget just came out, $81 billion. And of course, over half of that, probably 2/3 of that, is for education. And she wants cradle to the grave education. Yep. So not only do you get preschool with meals and daycare, with in-home supervisions and all these kinds of things, but then also you have junior college is free. Mm-hmm. Now, how can you mandate that? How can you mandate that people pay taxes for that? Most junior college offers offerings like an associate's degree in comic book comic books and basket weaving. And yet I know it's a political ploy. I know it's trying to get people in your political party. I know it's placating to victim mentality, but that is a huge percentage of what's going on. Almost half of that is just food. That education is just, it's not education, it's feeding. It's feeding. So
welfare system.
It's welfare system. And so
right.
These are the things in the news today, all of them disturbing, all of them, important.
No, and things, and so I like this segment because, the Bible is in play in our culture every day.
Yes.
Every news cycle, every news thing, there's Bible perspective, there's Bible opinion, and we need to be looking at things through the lens of Scripture.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's 2.5 million people of school age in Michigan, and like 1.9 or 1.8 are in public schools. So all this budgeting, all this taxes are going for those in the public schools, which of course is basically conditioning a bunch of universal its.
Right.
Okay. But there's a whole bunch of people who are outside of the realm of what these benefits are because they don't practice the public education. They have home education, church education, private education, etc. Maybe no education. I don't know. But I mean, that's a good portion, almost 1/3 of students in Michigan, which is very high state for non-public education.
Right, and that's coming under attack now, even with the idea that homeschoolers and Christian school students are going to need to register with the state.
Yes.
Of course, it's all being pushed under the guise of safety for children and whatnot. But really what the threat is, the freedom to educate your children by the dictates of your conscience.
Right.
Because ultimately that responsibility has been delegated from God to parents to train up their children.
Remember, Governor Whitmer is one that put old folks in nursing homes and put COVID patients in nursing homes and had folks catch it and die. So government control by Whitmer's political standards is not necessarily good.
Yep.
Same thing is true. What made parents revolt? And this gets right to our topic, sports as a cultural weapon. What made parents finally revolt, even pro-public school parents, was that we can't come together and our kids can't play sports.
Right.
That's ultimately what got them. It's such an important cultural icon that she was trying to control that by whatever means she could through high school sports. Well, and I played sports all my life, love sports. I have 5 sons. You have 6 daughters. We don't want them to be involved in certain aspects of culture and society that definitely are negative. And so sports is one of those things that can be a positive thing. And yet today it's just one of those things we really have to be careful about. Right. I mean, we don't want idolatry of people. We don't want iconoclast of sports or, people who can play sports versus people who can't play sports or don't want to play sports being lifted up or put down in some sort of, caste system. And yet it can still be a positive thing. So I have a bunch of articles here that I found. And I mean, this is going on. This is a global phenomena. First one comes from The Guardian out of England. And it's about soccer, the culture of greed riddled with inequalities, global football, mirror of the age. In other words, all this corruption and all this greed, and we got a guy who's a soccer player, and he's getting paid more than anybody else in the country. He's got the number one income, and what does he do with it? He buys more cars. He has more girlfriends. He, goes to more concerts. He, gilds himself with all these different things. There's not anything virtuous. It's selfish. It's the culture of greed. The next player says, well, I want that kind of contract. And so ticket prices go up and commercials go up, prices go up. And so the whole thing goes up and people keep going for it. And so what has to pay for it now? Gambling. Mm-hmm. Sports gambling has to pay for it now. And so to what extent do you think that's they're saying that that's the case in soccer, and we can see that in soccer. How much is that now in Major League Baseball, in National Football League, in the NBA, National Basketball Association? To what extent are we seeing that in the NBA? I mean, I know the San Antonio Spurs have a virtue that's unknown to mankind in all that. But I mean,
I'm a Spurs fan.
Pastor Jay's a Spurs fan. But how do you see that affecting professional
Well, listen,
sports?
Where's the Super Bowl this week?
Right. Las Vegas.
In Las Vegas.
Right.
And because that's the effects of sports gambling that has brought into it to fuel, that has now taken this billion-dollar industry and has just exponentially let it grow. Yeah. Obviously, the players are wanting more of the piece of the pie, and so there's an idea of that. The talent. Even in high school or college sports, there was always the glamour of the pureness of amateurness. Yeah. Right. Amateur sports, playing for your team, and that's all changing now. It's NIL. Yeah. We had coaches that are saying you can't get a quarterback for less than $2 million now in college. You got to pay for it. You got to find a way to pay for it. So you're going to have, it's going to break down that.
The college basketball or football coach is the highest paid person in the state
of Michigan,
from public funds, usually. And so therefore they have to generate funds, and they do.
Right.
And unfortunately they do. And then that involves gambling, which always falls into corruption.
Well, and it's broken all the way down into the youth leagues now, where sports, and we're going to get into this, parents are not utilizing sports as a mechanism to teach character and teamwork and values and the value of hard work. Right now, it's very much, my kid has to get mine, and a piece of the it's participatory. And it doesn't fuel sometimes it used improperly. It doesn't fuel the right things because even on the national level, these athletes, aren't heroes, are not moral character heroes.
Never.
No.
Yeah. And so. It's one of those things that can build character, but it seems like as it's gone over the top, it's done the other thing. It's kind of taken people away from that. All this Super Bowl money, and there's debauchery in that Super Bowl halftime show and everything around it. But all that Super Bowl money, it's not going to missions. Right. It's not going to cure cancer. Yeah. I mean, there's nothing kind of virtuous about it. Maybe that's why people have it. It's a modern day Babylonian, tower. Right. To some extent that people want to use as Super Bowl day, churches are canceling church because they can't compete with the Super Bowl anyways, or they're just saying we're gonna have a Super Bowl, Sunday. We've never done that. We've always said
even when the Lions were in the NFC Championship, we're in Michigan, and that was a once in a lifetime experience. We still had church,
and a few people probably didn't come to church because of that.
We actually could attend.
But what I'm saying is when that's your culture,
right?
When your culture is, you can enjoy this, but not versus church. Al Jazeera of all things, right? Out of Qatar, India's Narendra and Modi, the BJP, which is their sports, and ICC Cricket World Cup, the Cricket World Cup, and the politics thereof. In other words, Modi was coming out and saying, "This is how I'm going to keep myself in power. This is how I'm going to be popular. This is how India is going to stand above other nations, et cetera, et cetera." And so cricket is huge in India and elsewhere, and it's growing. Actually, I just had a conversation with a guy in a church down in Dearborn, and he was like all about cricket. We were talking about the rules and the players, and there's like 12 cricket clubs in Detroit. Yeah, and so just like there's followers of teams, or there's bars where you could go and they follow a particular soccer team or something like that. That culture is huge, even in Detroit.
But don't they realize that cricket is the fruit of British imperialism?
Yeah, I know. Right, but I mean, maybe the Brits were trying to culturally take over through sports.
Come on now.
And so, here on one say we say, greed is is affecting this, or is it just a mirror? Is the sport affecting us, or is the sport just being a mirror of us?
We can think back just real quick, because you're talking about it's a politician that's getting on the back of sports to keep himself in power.
Yeah.
And now we think back to Roman culture and Roman civilization.
Yeah.
The Colosseum was a tool of the Caesars.
Are you not entertained?
Are you not entertained? It's a tool to keep the masses under control.
The Guardian actually, and this is in England, they write an article, Super Bowl Vegas betting and gambling, and not necessarily about the corrupting factor, but how now that gambling's legal and in Vegas, what's the pressure upon the teams? Now, there's conspiracy theories that Kelsey and Taylor Swift's relationship is on purpose to make people bet on Kansas City. Okay, so it's a financial thing, and so the conservatives are saying, no, we're gonna bet on San Francisco. So there's a countercultural thing. And so, what about these players? Can they resist?
Which is really gonna ruin legitimate sports betting, because now the legitimate guy aren't gonna be able to guess anymore.
No.
It's the over under.
Yeah, the over under won't mean anything.
It won't mean anything
unless there's a girlfriend involved.
Right.
You won't know what's going on. And then this summer we have the Olympics, the UN General Assembly. Now, the Olympic Committee is the Olympic Committee. The UN is the UN, but the UN General Assembly adopts an Olympic truce for Paris 2024. In other words, the UN's gotten together and say, peace around the world, peace around the world. And here's the thing, sports was always meant to be this political icon to bring in peace.
Right.
Right?
It was supposed to be non-political.
Right.
Right.
And so, the Bible talks about when they say peace and safety, peace, then sudden destruction will come upon them.
But it was part of the New Testament world. I mean, Paul uses the analogy of sport in the Bible.
Yeah.
Run your race,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
He talks about the athlete who bodily exercise profiteth little, or striving for mastery. You know what I mean? So he uses these sports metaphors that are in the Bible. So, yeah.
So again, sports is benign in and of itself.
Right.
Come up with a game, it's entertainment, it's exercise, there's rules, there's referees. You can be buds, in it and play. But the fact that is it a mirror of us, or is it corrupting us? It's being used as political fodder. The gambling aspect's actually affecting the games themselves. Wikipedia has an article on the Red Sport International. When the communists came to power in Russia and they wrote the Communist Manifesto, the Communist Manifesto actually has things that will help the communist revolution take over the world, and one of them sports. And so some people say that this was part of why the Olympics were fought over, because the communists want to use the Olympics as much as anybody else to try to bring about communist ideology and their so-called definitions of brotherhood. And the Red Sport International was kind of like the USSR, the CCCP's NFL to promote whatever it was that they wanted to promote, which was world communism, basically through sport. And so political ideology, void of God, has found its way in this grand surf, this grand wave that is sports.
That is until Rocky met Drago and stopped it.
If I can change,
and
you can change, then we can all change.
Right,
Why can't we all change?
We need a new Rocky to come up and stop.
Well, listen, they make Rocky ad infinitum, and so I don't think I'm ever going to watch another Rocky ever in the history of the planet. But this is a good article by Stephen F. Ross. Fans of the World Unite, a capitalist manifesto for sports consumers. So here's this book called Fans of the World Unite, a capitalist manifesto for sports consumers, saying, no, this isn't communist, this is capitalist. And it's funny because the worst part of capitalism, greed and money and selfism, not going to feed the children or any of these things, just to benefit self, so to speak, and all the industry of selling shoes and whatever else can go with it. It's a capitalist, the worst part of capitalism, and then the worst part of communism, fighting, and then at the UN saying, hey, let's just use it all, with the Rocky mantra of can't we all just get along? So I just thought, we're getting these conversations from every angle about sport. War's going on, but let's stop the war. Peace, politics, commerce, corruption, whatever the societal conversation is, sports is in there. Sports is in there. ESPN owned by, ABC and Disney, is just one of the biggest deals, and they have 700 channels. And if you can't find a football game, you can find a preschool tiddlywinks
But
competition on there. I mean, constant, 24/7.
but in the ESPN Disney era,
Yeah,
ESPN is no longer just about sports, but now has become one of the leading
Woke.
motivators,
Yeah.
right, of ideology and religion. And now we have, there's always this pushback that we want our athletes just to be athletes, but not to be involved politically or
Right.
speak politically.
Yeah.
And yet there's a vehicle there, and because so many people
Yeah.
have their eyes upon sports, it's
Right.
such a cultural influencer. And
you don't want the kid getting up there that's very popular and saying Jesus Christ is number one.
right, that guy's bad.
let's-
Tim Tebow's bad,
Right.
but Kaepernick is good.
Right.
And so is sports a reflection of our morality
Right.
and our ideology, or is it the cause of it? Is it building it? Is it shaping it?
We're having capitalistic greed
Right.
and corruption, but we're having communist godlessness
Right.
in it as well. And so both have tried to claim sport. I put down here in application, sports is a neutral sum game, like cooking or fashion. It's neither here nor there, but cooking can get out of control, fashion can get out of control. But it always seems to degenerate into a tool for evil. If corralled correctly by Christian culture, can be used for character in Christ. We use it here in our Christian school to motivate good behavior, attendance, good grades, character development, right? Sometimes you learn more through losing and having to swallow that and be a good sport and go home and try harder. Sometimes that's a good cultural icon to have, is, working hard. It's kind of like same guy, he plants his crops and does all the work, and then a storm comes and you lost, and you have to swallow that. You have to go on and do it again next year and do it better, maybe, and try to find ways to insulate yourself. And so sports can do that, and then even winning. Learning, being a champion can affect your mind and heart in your life. You get to cut down the nets and take home the trophy, but in good ways and bad ways. And so you're trying to build, your student body, your children or whatever. I always knew for my boys, as pastors' kids, it's tough being a pastor's kid. There's some things that people judge you unfairly on. You're being watched, etc. And so I was like, if there's going to be a vice, it's going to be this $10 soccer ball, or this $20 basketball, and put some effort into building your lungs and building your legs and competing against your brothers, in that regard. But it also can it's brought out the worst in me at times, where the ref throws the flag, blows the whistle, and the penalty's on the coach for being out of his seat, running around like an idiot.
Right.
You've never done that.
Never gotten a technical.
I don't believe that.
I've never got. I've been
a
coaching
technical.
girls basketball for 10 years, and I've never gotten a technical.
Even when you threw the clipboard,
Yeah, I thought I did, but they never gave me
they
one.
never gave you technical. Wow. Okay. Well, listen, you haven't lived.
You're not coaching.
You're not coaching right. That's why you're not
coaching.
succeeding.
You're not coaching.
No, I'm just kidding. Well, listen, I think always, Pastor, we have to accept, is sports okay? Yes. But it comes with some responsibilities, and we should have rules to that.
Yeah, I've always, the part about Christian athletics that I've always appreciated is creating artificial environments of stress
Sure.
in these young people's lives that help them learn how to overcome it. Because ultimately, a failure on the basketball court is not a life failure.
Right.
But if it produces a stress, or there's a challenge and there's a goal, and especially for young women, to be able to have enough that they can accomplish something.
Sure.
I can work hard and I
Yeah.
can do something. And even a little bit of the idea of imposing my will, in the sense of not in striving against one's husband in the future or whatnot, but imposing my will over this work that must be accomplished.
Sure.
And so, hey, I got to get this house in order. I'm going to impose my will upon it. I got to get these kids from point A to point B. I'm going to impose my will upon them. And in other words, I'm going to set myself to a task and to be able to accomplish.
I'm tired.
Right.
I have opposition. I'm actually behind the 8 ball. It looks like I'm going to lose, but I've got to see this through.
I got to see it through. I got to get this done. I got to get through this week.
I mean, you could argue that if kids would just work, sometimes that's abusive as well. But this is a thing that's helping them have something where, their endorphins kick in when they accomplish something.
Right.
Score a point,
Right.
even, or just get playing time, whatever that is, and it can translate. I mean, there could be a negative aspect to it because sometimes it can be overdone. But like you said, the scriptures actually are full of
Sport analogy.
Yep. I have 1 Corinthians 9, verse 24. Know ye not that they which run in a race run all, but one receive the prize, so run that you may obtain.
Yep.
Not everyone wins the prize. You can't just get a participation medal. You run to win. You run to win. You play to win.
Right.
You work, you plant the fields in order to eat. Right. In order to make a buck. That's why you do it. And so it can teach some things. Run that you may obtain. Hebrews 12:1. Wherefore, seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses. It's almost like the Colosseum, right? Let us lay aside every weight and the sin which does so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us. He's talking about kind of the marathon run that enters the arena with everybody around there, and you've trained, and when they would run the marathon, would they run with like barely anything on? Right?
No,
nothing's going to.
The original Olympics were like naked.
Yeah, and so I'm not saying he's that, but I mean, really, for us to in our Christianity, we have to run unashamed. Right. We can't be burdened. 2 Timothy 4:7. I have fought a good fight. I have finished my course. I have kept the faith. Keeping your faith is a boxing match, right? And you go 12 rounds, man. You stay in it. And you take your licks and you give them too, right? I finished my course. You got to run those laps. You got to finish them. I know when I was coaching, the guys would come in. The very first thing as they were coming in, lacing up their shoes, kind of bouncing the basketball. I'd blow it and I'd say, okay, before we even start practice, I want you to run champion laps. So they'd have to run CHAMPIONS. They'd have to run that many laps before we started. You got to be a champion before you start practice, and we got to practice like champions. And it was just a mindset, right? And then I didn't have to start off with any much calisthenics or anything because they had already done some running. But start well, finish well. These are wonderful principles in the scriptures that sports can teach. Spiritual principles of life and victory, relationships. If you're on the court with the team, that's a relationship. Sometimes you have to pass the ball because he's got the better shot, right? Even if you're the better player. Sometimes you have to pose that guy because he's on the other team. You don't hate him, but you're opposing him. Sometimes, in work, I got to make the sale. That guy's trying to sell his widget, and I'm trying to sell my widget. It's not personal. I'll take him out for lunch, whoever sells the widget. But it's competition, And so many wonderful lessons can be taught, can be had, if we'll train up our kids right. If churches will take the right aspect on it, not become idolatrous in it, not put it first, but use it, I guess, as a supplement. It's just a vitamin. You still got to eat a good meal, but the vitamin of sports can be a positive thing, and yet we have to measure it in society. What would you say to a family? Maybe they got some kids and they're into sports. What's some things that they could put in rules or measures to be able to take in the good and keep out the bad? What are some rules you might have in your house?
Well, about for an athlete or whatnot?
Sure.
Well, I mean, there's a number of things. First of all, rules like, so here's some things that we practice. Like if you're going to join a team, you don't quit.
Right.
You know what I mean? So yes. You're not a quitter.
Don't quit.
Yeah, you do everything to do your hardest. That's great. The other thing that we try to enforce is the idea, I do it with my girls, is, the authority, understanding how to get along with difficult people.
Sure.
But then also how to respond to coaching. Right. As well. Yeah. And so if you have a problem with the coach, go talk to the coach, go and, and if you're not getting the result that you want, then change what you're doing to get a different result.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So the coach isn't playing me enough. Well, why?
Self measurement.
Yeah. Self-awareness. And to do that. And then I also, I think the other, good role in this is that they're applying to themselves to something that can be wholesome. And it's, every minute on the court is a minute that they're not on, and in practice, they're not on their phone. Right. And for a young man, I think about I have daughters, but for a young man is growing into his body, has testosterone flowing through at levels he'll never have again in his life, right? And he needs to apply himself to something. Yeah. And we're no longer an agrarian society, right. And we're no longer a society where, and sadly, many young men are not put to labor, right. And they ought to. Right. They ought to. So exercise the idea of going out and just, and moving your body, lifting heavy things, running very fast, those are all good disciplines.
Me having sons, besides the motivation of good grades and good behavior and things like that, is there is for a man proper level of aggression.
Yeah.
If a man provides not for his family, he's worse than an infidel. And so, loving your wife means you're jumping in front of the bullet, or you're sending the bullet out first. And so there is a proper level of aggression that doesn't end up controlling you or ruling you, but you have to be able to use that in competition. I always wanted my boys to look at a good athlete who had character, and so you could put a certain poster on the wall, but you couldn't you couldn't put Dennis Rodman.
Right.
We're not going to put Dennis Rodman on the wall, but what's a good? So you could use that as a measure of character.
He doesn't embody what we're about.
And so if the guy can throw a basketball, that doesn't mean he's as important to society as a guy who can rule well, or a doctor who can practice medicine well, or a pastor who's going to serve God. You're just as much of a hero.
Yeah.
It's just as difficult, and so valuing leadership and examples and things like that, I think, is important for society. And in our house, we were careful about, which characters, that we had. And so, folks, in the best culture is a Bible culture. It's proven and it works. But the Bible has sports analogy in it. And so the best culture can have sports, but uses it for character, uses it well for culture, uses it well as motivation, and doesn't allow us to get the best of us. And just as our culture is dying as we leave Christ, I think even the good part about sports, the part that we could always trust and involve in our lives, is something now that we have to maybe hold up some reservations to. We did that with our kids. Well, if you don't get a B, you can't play. Or if you won't go to school, you don't get to play. Or if you can't get along, you can't play. And so sometimes you would use it. Today we might want to say, kids, look, we're going to watch the game, but mute the commercials, or turn the channel to something else or whatever. So there has to be a measure of control on sports in the home. It can't be 24/7, all things sports, because just like any other medium, it has a corrupting of value, and we should be careful about it in the church as well. Well, folks, that's it for today for Bible Nation Society. Remember, the best culture is the Bible culture. It's proven and it works. Website is BibleNation.org. We'd love to hear back from you. Thanks for listening.